Have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot! Artest looking, gets it right. Ryan Tillman has to put it up for the buzzer. Banks it! Oh! He banks it!
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. As you know, Scotty Talks NBA is brought to you by DSM Media, so make sure you're following DSM Media on Twitter at DSM_media. You can also find DSM Media on Instagram at DSM.DoSomethingMajor and on TikTok at DSM Media. Got a very special guest on the plate today. As you guys may know him by Austin Krell or NBA Krell on Twitter. He's always dropping some fire takes, always bringing us some good Sixers content. Welcome to the show, Austin. How you doing today, my man?
No problem. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to catch up with the local programs. So
Exactly. So we're definitely going to dive into some Sixers talk. Obviously, Harden's debut later on this week. We'll talk a little bit about the All-Star game. Before we get into that, make sure you're following Austin on social media, on Twitter at NBA Krell. You can find all of his written work. He's also an NBA reporter on The Painted Lines, so you can find The Painted Lines at The Painted Lines on Twitter. And, of course, you can find all his written work on their website. And then you just moved into a new role, which you weren't in the last time I had you on the show, but you're an NBA contributor for the USA Today Sports Media Group.
correct.
How's that new endeavor treating you, Austin?
I like it. It's not like not extensive writing, so it's not like what I do for the main the main site.
Yeah.
It just sort of I hop into different mediums depending on what their main contributors need and fill in for them when they don't have time. So it's just another thing on the resume.
Awesome, man. And your resume's starting to stack up there, Austin. But nonetheless, make sure everybody, if you're watching this, viewing this, listening to this, make sure you're following Austin on all social media platforms. And then also make sure you're following his podcast. He is the host of The Feed to Embiid. And that's at The Feed to Embiid. Very straightforward, so it should be easy to find. But let's dive in here. We'll start with the All-Star Weekend. I know I talked to you briefly off camera or in the DMs at least about the All-Star. Your thoughts? How did you enjoy the All-Star Weekend? You maybe go through the 3 or 4 separate days of the event and thoughts on each. What were your takeaways?
I thought, my favorite All-Star event is the celebrity game. Like that's the best event of the night of the weekend, I think. Just because you never know what you're going to get. It's always funny to see people who have no idea how to play basketball playing basketball. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the commentary. I think it's entertaining. The Rising Stars Challenge I thought was really good this year. I like the format where they do 3 games. I thought that was pretty cool. And then you get Saturday night. That was the worst Saturday night I've ever seen in my life. That whole got to include all of the Antetokounmpo brothers and
a skills challenge at that. Come on.
There was no skill involved in that skills challenge. It was the Cavaliers did pretty well, but and the rookies I thought was a good taste. But I just like the old format. Find however many guys, 6-8 guys, whatever it is, and let them go head to head and knock each other out. And I think that's the best way to do it. The old course was always the best course.
Yeah.
And then the dunk contest was a joke. It was horrible. I think it was the first time. It was probably the first time ever that you had a dunk contest where the combined field goal percentage was 35%, which is pretty bad for a dunk contest, obviously. The 3-point shootout is one of my favorite events every year because there's always somebody who gets absurdly hot, and you're just like, how is this guy making every single shot in a row? Even if they're open practice shots, it's still you find yourself in awe of what you're watching because they're just hitting them over and over again. And then the game was outstanding. All-Star game itself was great.
Yeah, I thought the All-Star game was great. I agree with you on just about everything. Going back to the skills challenge, just that format of the 3 different games sucks. Maxey didn't play very well. He's playing more of that facilitator role. He's probably tired after that.
He was very much like, I don't really care. I'm good.
Yeah. So I didn't put too much into that, but it was an interesting format nonetheless. And then Saturday, I agree. I like the old format. I would just like to see playmakers, and that one's a little bit different to me. Like, why can't they get a bunch of stars to do that skills challenge? Because it's not like a high risk of injury like a dunk contest per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it probably doesn't have the flash of like a 3-point shootout or a dunk contest. Would be my guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it has the ability to be entertaining.
I do too.
I'm actually a pretty big advocate for like put some terrible 3-point shooters in the contest just to like add some climax to it. I think would be kind of funny.
Yeah, and just one last thing regarding the All-Star weekend. I'm just curious, who did you have slated to win like the dunk contest and the 3-point contest? Like, who, if you even thought about it beforehand?
I didn't think about it, honestly. I think the dunk contest, you're usually most inclined to just go with the most athletic guy,
right?
And I didn't really have a taste for that dunk contest. I didn't really have any kind of like thing for it. I also think the dunk contest, there's no point in doing it anymore because you've seen every dunk you can think of. Like,
yeah, that's part of it.
It's outdated. Like, there's no point anymore.
It's like becoming like the off-court antics is getting like the showmanship is becoming more of the score now. It's weird.
Yes, I think for the 3-point shootout, I don't even remember who I had. I mean, I'm not surprised Cat won it. I thought maybe Luke Kennard would be a surprise.
Yeah, Luke Kennard was my pick.
Yeah.
And he got close. I mean, he was pretty hot there at the end. Cat was just otherworldly.
Yeah. The key to that is like you just have to have like a really quick release. And like guys who don't have like typically quick releases, they tend to tire themselves out trying to like adjust their release and get through it in time, and they just end up not making enough shots. But like if you have a quick release like Luke Kennard, you're good to go.
Do that all day. Yeah, I agree. So nonetheless, at least the All-Star game was good. I guess that's the goal, right? Steph Curry was amazing, and Embiid was amazing.
I was nuts. Curry was. I mean, people are like, it's just the All-Star game. Like, if you can make 16 threes in an NBA in an NBA speed game,
right?
It's something there is going on.
Even just having fans in the stands, like Curry was getting booed all weekend too, like hellaciously booed from the Cleveland crowd. So like, it's not just some wipe away move there by Curry. He's definitely one of the GOATs for a reason. But let's get into a little bit of Sixers talk. Obviously, the All-Star weekend kind of divided up the action there for the Sixers. They got the huge win against the Bucks going into the break. But really what I want to go back to is the actual trade. I actually just wanted to get your thoughts. How surprised were you that Morey actually, and when I say Morey, I mean the Sixers front office, how surprised were you that they were able to get a Ben Simmons trade done before the deadline?
Once the Shams report came out the Friday before, I was pretty confident just because when you see teams or when you see like public momentum gather that way, usually that doesn't happen for nothing. Like it usually happens and then a deal is consummated because there's so much invested in getting it done on both sides. And you feel like at that point, bringing the players back to their old teams just isn't an option anymore. Right. So, I mean, once like the talking it up happened on Wednesday, and then Thursday, obviously it got real tight. It just kind of felt like it was a definite sure thing. And I mean, even when like all the insiders were, saying like, I really doubt it's going to happen. I was sitting there, I'm like, this is going to happen. this is absolutely going to happen because at that point, like, there was just so much, that had gone into it in terms of the public negotiations part, and there was so much build up to it. And Harden had made it pretty clear, that he wasn't gonna, he wanted out. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of felt like after a certain point, it was, do the Nets have a better chance of winning with that core than they do. And is that chance worth the risk of not winning the championship and then losing Harden for nothing?
For
And then
nothing.
basically you come out with zilch in the end. So I think like if you measure those two probabilities, it's a trade that kind of makes sense for the Nets and all said and done too.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that. And I guess that kind of feeds into my next question, and it's regarding the trade itself. But, obviously, I don't want to ask you who won the trade, because I feel like that is something that can't be defined until Ben Simmons plays, right? Like James Harden has to play this Friday. If it's supposed to be when he debuts, but Ben Simmons got to play. You got to see how all this pans out. Just looking at it objectively, like, do you think it was fair value for both teams in reality?
Yeah, I mean, I do. So like, here's kind of my thinking about it. Andre Drummond's a backup center, and you're realistically in the playoffs, you're not going to play him more than 10 12 minutes anyway.
Right.
And with any backup center next to James Harden, theoretically, you just need somebody who has decent enough hands to catch a lob at the rim and then screen hard and then protect the glass. So that's a replaceable entity. Seth Curry, as good as he was for the Sixers, was probably going to price himself out of their ability to re-sign him 2 summers from now. So are you really not going to make this trade because and then not re-sign one of the key cogs in the trade 2 summers from now? Like that doesn't make sense. And then obviously Ben wasn't playing for you. So I mean, I think the Sixers, I think the Nets fans, are a lot of it is just like they don't want to believe that they got fleeced.
That's what it seems like.
I don't think it was like they got fleeced in terms of value. I think it was more in terms of like they were sold on Harden wanting to be there and this new big three and undefeated, couldn't be stopped. And then lo and behold, they were like, maybe not so much. So I think they were sold on that. I think at the end of the day, the Sixers had a max player who wasn't playing for them, and they got a better player than that max player back, and they gave up 2 replaceable role players who probably weren't going to figure into the long-term future. If they had included Tyrese Maxey or Matisse Thybulle, that's a different conversation about really where the value lies in this trade. I still think the Nets are a very good team, and I think if they're fully healthy in the playoffs, I would actually pick them to win a series against the Sixers. So I think at the end of the day, both teams had different needs that were addressed by their trades.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to put it in reality is, Andre Drummond, while you're just losing a backup center in Philadelphia, you get a starting caliber center in Brooklyn, and that's ultimately what they need. They needed a big body, and Seth Curry isn't hurting anybody's roster right now. So I definitely agree with you in that sense. I want to kind of turn the page a bit and just kind of focus on James Harden and kind of what he said in that introductory press conference. Basically saying, he always wanted to be moved to Philadelphia. He always wanted to rekindle that connection with Morey. What does it mean for the city of Philly? Does it mean anything given the relationship between Morey and Harden? Just as a sense of, Philly as a market to garner superstars to want to come there. Do you think it means anything in that, or are you kind of throwing that out the window given Morey's history with Harden?
Well, I just think like press conferences are a very good opportunity to pay lip service and
yes,
and advertise yourself, basically. Like this is a whole marketing campaign for me. I'm going to go speak to the press, and I think a couple of things realistically make Philly a decent option for a star. Number one, like you can live in the neighboring areas of Jersey, and it's not the tax rates aren't as bad as they would be in, say, Brooklyn. Number two, I think it's less about Philly and more about the fact, like, Harden knows that Daryl Morey, philosophically speaking, is all about appeasing his stars, and he'll let them run wild and do whatever they want because he knows at the end of the day, as long as they're happy, you have a chance to win. And so I think Harden, I think there's obviously a personal relationship there.
Yeah.
he had a close relationship with the Sixers ownership brass and some of the local Philly legends. So I think that kind of plays a role here. But I think at the end of the day, Harden, if he knew that he could sort of govern the way things were with Daryl Morey, and so that was something of comfort for him, and he wanted that.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Obviously I was getting really really ecstatic about some of his answers, but then you got to kind of hone it back in and go back and listen to some of the things he, said when he got to Brooklyn about it being scary hours, right? Like, so
Yeah.
you gotta take everything with a grain of salt. He doesn't want to come out here and have Philly fans looking at him sideways. So it makes a ton of sense there. I guess the next part of it would just be, the fit of Harden in Philly. Like, obviously we can see it all on paper. We can see the starting lineup on paper. So maybe that's a good starting point. With the addition of Harden, what do you think, or what is I don't know how to word this, I guess. What would you say would be the starting lineup? What would be your ideal starting lineup with this roster?
So I think like Daryl and Doc, and I think like the signs probably point to Tyrese Maxey being it being like James, Tyrese, Thibault, Harris, Embiid.
Yeah.
If it were me, I would go Harden, Danny Green, Thibault, Harris, Embiid, just because I think you can really knock two birds out with one stone there, because not only do you fortify the shooting in your starting lineup, and you take there's one less ball handler in that starting lineup to eat touches out of Harden and Embiid's hands, but also you stick Maxey in that second unit and you say, just here's the ball, go be a running back and just run it up and down the floor and score. And
yeah.
he can give you 15 to 20 points a night off the bench. And that would really fortify a second unit that's had ups and downs this season, and it also is a cleaner fit in the starting lineup as well, because there's not multiple guards jockeying for touches while you have Embiid who's trying to post up. So
exactly
that's what I would do.
No, and that's kind of where I was at with it as well. Like, I get the idea of Maxey and Harden as a backcourt is like, it's like exciting, I guess. Maxey's like this young talent. Harden's this like phenom that we really haven't seen in a while in our backcourt in Philadelphia, at least. But just looking at the scoring punch that Maxey could bring off the bench, what he does and what he could do for that second unit, I definitely understand that. So I guess follow-up question to that: what does Harden look like beside Embiid? And then just a caveat question to that: what does he look like beside Maxey if they do decide to pair them in that backcourt together?
Yeah, so I think like number one, I don't know that it's like the perfect fit per se, because you obviously you don't want to take touches away from Embiid while he's having an MVP caliber season.
Right.
But on top of that, like, you need a shot creator desperately. You need somebody that can go be a closer and can go create points and be a point guard. And is it a perfect fit? No, but does it resolve like so many issues? Yes. So that's kind of where you have to take the good and the bad. I think like with Maxey in the backcourt, what I would probably do and experiment with is like just run some crazy actions, like run like Maxey screening for Harden, and just make defenses really like sensory overload, have to overthink things, and make them really like sweat, because the more confusion and the more speed and the more ball handling and maneuvering you have there, the more you'll be able to catch defenses off guard. So I think if if it were me, instead of going all traditional with have Tobias or Joel screen, try mixing in a small screen and
like
really confuse defenses a little bit. And maybe even Embiid's there for a lob to the rim because someone's trying to play up on you because they're thinking that you're gonna pop or switch or whatever. There's a ton of different ways to go there. I also think that Maxey, he's gotten better at shooting off the catch and sort of spacing out to the corners and being prepared to let it fly without touching anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge bonus too. More than anything, that it's going to be harder for defenses to double one guy, because Harden and Embiid, it may take some time, but they're eventually going to have games where they're both just insane. At the same time. And so defenses are going to be like, well, if we double him, then the other guy's going to be left open. And then if he swings it to him, they're going to have to recover. And then like, what do we do there? And then, Max is going to be open on those swing passes. That's going to be where Maxey can use his speed and attack gaps and attack closeouts and really put some burden on your interior. So I think they're going to exhaust defenses out too. And then just next to Embiid with the free throw rate, they're going to have games where you're in the bonus within the first 4 or 5 minutes, and they're going to you're going to they're going to have bigs in foul trouble. They're going to have guards in foul trouble. If Harden can really be 85 to 90% of what prime Harden was, that's a massive problem for the rest of the NBA. And I mean, time will tell if that's what he is, but I also wouldn't be so quick to not I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that part of his decline over the last year and a half is like he's actively trying to get out of Houston, and then he's in Brooklyn, doesn't really love it there, doesn't love it there this year either.
Right.
And so he doesn't have the passion or the fire inside him to really buckle in for a consistent stretch. And be great. But I do know that in the last 5 games he played for the Nets, I think 2 of them were like 35-point triple doubles. So.
Yeah. So that was the interesting thing, with Nets fans. They, kind of jumped ship when he was traded, started calling him washed, and even national media, I guess, did it to an extent as well. But it doesn't.
I love that because it's like, well, okay, so the Sixers were supposed to then trade Ben Simmons for less. But then when they get hard, it's like, no, you gave too much. Like, bad trade. Like, that's what, no, shut up. Let both players play 1 minute for their new NBA team before you decide who has won the trade and who hasn't won the trade. For all we know, the Nets could repackage Ben Simmons and trade him this summer and get reinforcements that they like elsewhere with their guys. Who knows? There's an abundance of possibilities here. There's no way to know who won the trade yet.
Exactly. And it's, it's way too early on in that road to really go down, I guess you could say. Yeah. And to your point, just about, I guess I don't know what you would call it in the Sixers offense, just as far as, well, yeah, I do know what you would call it, just becoming less predictable. Because that was something that I noticed. And when I heard Duncan Robinson say, I was listening to Duncan Robinson's podcast the other day at the gym, and he was talking with, it was George Yang. Yeah, George Yang was on his podcast. And they were talking kind of about, the predictability of certain offenses in the NBA and how the Sixers, you're just going to get a ton of post-ups when you go into that game. Right. And if they could just, put a little variety into that offense, like you said, I think that could do numbers for them. But yeah, just to keep it moving here. You talked about the fit beside Embiid and Maxey. My next question that I'm just, awfully curious about from on your thoughts on it, who on the Sixers, is going to benefit the most from James Harden? Obviously, some stress will be taken off of Embiid's back. He's having this MVP caliber season. His usage is up to the sky, obviously. So some stress will be taken off his shoulders, but obviously, I'm looking at guys like Tobias Harris, Danny Green. Who do you think is going to be the guys that benefit the most from Harden acquisition?
Yeah, I think Danny Green's going to be a very significant beneficiary. I don't think he was ever really close to being involved in any trades, just from what I've heard.
Why is that?
I just think that he's well liked in the locker room, and I think he's a good fit on the roster. I don't know how much of his current spot in the rotation is them being conservative and wanting him healthy for when the games really count.
Yeah.
But he's a guy who was really effective last year because you had a point guard who could put a lot of downhill pressure on the rim and could just hit him in the corner for threes. And I think with James Harden, a better half court creator than Ben Simmons was.
Yeah.
So, that's going to open up Danny's game too. And really, I mean, they need guys that are going to draw in and manipulate enough space for them and then kick it to the open shooter. The Sixers have had too many guys that are just way too hesitant to shoot the ball. Danny is not hesitant and Niang's not hesitant. You wish Korkmaz was more hesitant. Seth Curry, you would wish would stop thinking when he would shoot the ball
a little bit, yeah.
But I think when you have a manipulator like Harden does with what he can do to a defense, I think that really opens up the door for shooters to have more space and therefore be less hesitant.
I just wanted to hop on this because, when you said Niang, it like popped into my mind. Is there any part of you that would consider starting like
say again?
Similar to what they did against the Bucks?
You broke up there. Say it again.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you threw in Niang there, and it just popped into my mind. What are your thoughts regarding like a full-time Niang starting rotation, or in the starting lineup, I should say?
Yeah, I think it's better in theory than reality, just because like my biggest concern with this team is switching. Like the Wizards did that against Tyrese Maxey, and granted, Spencer Dinwiddie's no longer there, but the Celtics are going to do that to you. They're going to take advantage of a switchy defense. If you have too many guys who are either too small or too slow to move on the court and switch scheme, you're going to get bludgeoned. So I like that in dosages, like against like a bigger team like the Bucks that worked that one time. I also think that if Giannis has that matchup, he's going to probably win that battle handedly 99 times out of 100. What I'm actually a pretty big proponent of is if getting Alfonso McKinney in the buyout market. I wrote this yesterday, but he hasn't been very good in his NBA career. He only had one season where he shot he got 100 threes and he made 37% of them. But they just need more guys who can switch on the perimeter and not get abused after switching. And that's a huge weakness for them that I think is going to kill them in the playoffs if they do lose early in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree, which that kind of plays into my next question for you. Second to last question, by the way. I mean, I'm going to get you out of here, Austin. It was going to be regarding Paul Millsap before this Willie Cauley-Stein acquisition happened. Now, obviously, it's just a 10-day contract, so that doesn't mean anything definitely against Paul Millsap per se. Well, I guess first part of this question, do you think Paul Millsap has a role with this team?
Yes. Yeah, I like Paul Millsap. I think that would actually be my backup big going forward.
That's what I was thinking.
Because I think when you don't have Embiid on the floor, you need a big that can space out, because the more you can drag the opposing rim protector or the opposing big man away from the basket, the more you can open up the driving lanes for your ball handlers, and the better off you are. And so I think, Millsap is more than a passable 3-point shooter, and I think he would be perfect for that. Now, obviously, they don't seem to have a ton of faith in him, considering they just signed Willie Cauley-Stein, but I would certainly give Millsap a run. I think he would probably, for the time being, he'd be my number one backup big to Embiid.
I love it. And I have the same thoughts, honestly, especially after watching him. Obviously, it wasn't against the Bucks, his first showing. Who was it against? It was that first game last week. Celtics. Oh, when they got spanked, so we got to see him in garbage time. But he looked good, and then in the Milwaukee game, he did a few things as well. But
he looked very spry in the Milwaukee game.
He did.
Someone who wanted to prove that he could still play a little bit.
Exactly, and I like that. Aside from him being able to space the court, he is a guy in desperation times. I know we see Niang do it sometimes, where he gets into scramble mode in the paint. Paul Millsap can actually get a bucket in those type of situations, so I do like him for that aspect as well. So I mentioned Willie Cauley-Stein. I'm interested just briefly, because I know you mentioned him in your article that you referenced earlier in the show regarding the buyout market. Willie Cauley-Stein, they added him, 10-day contract. Do you think that there's a chance that he could get on the permanent roster? What are your thoughts regarding him?
I mean, I think he'll get a chance. I think what it comes down to, number one, is I think that's what probably a guy Doc wanted, because in theory, you already have Bassey and you have Paul Reed and those guys' profile as rim runners who could lob threats. I also think that Harden is so good with lob threat bigs that it really opens up your pool of potential guys who could fit that role and be effective in it. So I think he's just another guy that can fill that role. He has experience. He's still pretty young though. I don't have a problem with it. I don't want fans to think that it's going to change the Sixers world. It's not changing. It's not changing much at all about their trajectory. But I do think that it's a guy who they probably believe maybe there's something there that we can milk with Harden that he couldn't do previously in his career.
Yeah.
And if so, it's a diamond that you thought you found in the rough.
Right. He's still young. He's cheap. Why not? So,
he's 28. Like, he's been in the league forever. He's only 28. And,
yeah.
He's still pretty athletic. He hasn't matched it with consistent stretches of being a good rim protector and a good lob threat. But I think he's been like the top 25th percentile of bigs in block percentage for the last couple of years. I mean, he's a reputed rim protector.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, because I tweeted it out earlier. I'm along the same thinking as you as far as the bigs that they had before Willie Cauley-Stein. I don't think he's going to hurt anything. But I do just wonder, is he 100% a better option than like a Charles Bassey and getting him, some playing time here in the latter part of the season. But
I just would have gone more. I would have gone with the wing. Like I don't think they need another big. I think they need another wing.
I agree, and that was going to be my follow up. You mentioned Alfonso McKinney. What were some other wings in the buyout market that you were looking at? Is there any possibility of the Sixers adding anybody else, in your opinion?
Well, it's only a 10-day deal, so I think there's still a window open there if they don't like what they're getting out of Cauley-Stein. I think one thing about the buyout market that fans sort of neglect is not only does the player have to fit what you need, that player also has to be available and willing to take a pay cut. There are guys out there that I looked at who have really lucrative contracts still and might not want to bite, $10 million off for the sake of playing a small role for the Sixers. They might be content playing for the Thunder or for, the Magic or whatever.
Those are the Gary Harrises of the world.
Gary Harris.
Yeah, that's the one that came to mind when you said
that was the one that I was going to go with. Gary Harris, I think, would be absolutely perfect for this team. One problem is he's an unrestricted free agent this summer, I believe, but he has like a $20 million contract. So I don't know how much of that he'd have to eat still to get bought out, or if he even wants to get bought out. But that would be, if he's available, that would be the guy that you lick your chops for.
Yeah, 100%. How old is he?
27.
27, yeah. So he's still young as well. So that would be a good one. But like you said, not very likely. And I saw Schroeder's most likely not getting bought out as well. He wants to stay in Houston, which
he thinks he can get a bag if he plays well in Houston.
Exactly. He's going to get a bigger role in Houston, get a little bit more opportunity to show off his talents. And like you said earlier, I wouldn't even put, a ball handler, which Schroeder would help with perimeter defense, I do believe. But, just as far as the dying need for a ball handler on that second unit isn't as much there anymore with the acquisition of Harden. Last question for you, Austin, and I will certainly get you out of here. What are your general thoughts? Now, obviously, you haven't seen Harden on the floor yet, so we have to see the product before we can really judge it. But just off of this trade, fresh thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Sixers as title contenders this season already?
I think there's every reason to believe that this team can be scary in the East. I mean, if Harden's bought into being the, to not overtaking Joel's spot is number one, and if he understands like this is his last chance, like if Harden flames out here, that next contract is not going to be a max contract. He's not getting a max deal to go play. People aren't going to. His credibility is going to be shot. So I mean, I think he's probably going to be on better behavior per se. Yeah. And I would certainly, I think this team has a chance to be great. Really, really do. Wish they had a little bit more shooting and guys that were just willing shooters. But I certainly expect the energy in the Wells Fargo Center to pick up over the last couple of months of the season, and I think it's going to be a heck of a ride. I don't see any reason to be pessimistic about this team.
I like that answer. Not over the top and confidence, but I think you're in the right headspace there, and that's where I would fall into as well. Austin, thank you so much for joining the show today, my man. We got a plethora of knowledge from you as always. I always appreciate your thoughts and everything that you put out there as far as content regarding the Sixers and the NBA. Everybody out there, make sure if you're not already following Austin, follow him on Twitter at NBA Krell. It's right there on the screen. I will also plug it right in my in the comments below once this episode airs. So you'll be able to find Austin's Twitter page. You'll be able to find the painted lines, and make sure you tap in and check out all of Austin's content. Is there anything else you got going on right now that you want to let my viewers know about? Anything else, anywhere else we can find you?
Nope. It is Harden week though, so everybody buckle up. It's gonna be fun times coming, and be ready for some more content. That's all.
Love it. Thank you for the content, Austin. Thank you for joining my show, and I hope to chat with you very soon, my friend.
No problem, Scotty. Take care.
You as well, man. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. So that was the amazing Austin Krell of the Painted Lines, of USA Today, of the Feed to Embiid. Just an awesome personality, but more than personality, a dedicated hard worker. This guy puts the work in. I even know Kai Carlin over at the USA Today. Obviously, he's been on the show. These guys put in the work. They deserve all the credit. They deserve all the viewership, listenership, readership, whatever you want to call it. Make sure you go and check out all of Austin's work. He's an awesome dude, and he's putting out awesome content all the time. Before we end the show here, I just wanted to do a little bit of house cleaning with the NBA season. Whoops, flashed that a little too early there. But no, I wanted to do a little housekeeping just as far as what we got going on in the NBA. Wanted to go over top 5 MVP candidates coming out of the All-Star break. After that, just going to briefly get into the top 10 power rankings. So my top 10 teams after the All-Star break in the NBA. We'll get into those a little bit. And then I just want to go over a few storylines that I'm paying attention to for the rest of this season. Obviously, Harden in Philly is one of them, but we'll get into a couple of the storylines to pay attention to as the season progresses. But yeah, let's dive in now. So we'll start with the top 5 MVP candidates after All-Star break. They're all right up on the screen here for you. And I will get into all of them just briefly here. So obviously, number 1 on the list, you can call it bias, you can call it whatever the hell you want. It's Joel Embiid, 29.6 points per game, 11.2 rebounds per game, 4.5 assists per game. Sixers are the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference right now at 35-23. And the reinforcements have arrived. James Harden is in town, so they are only going to go up from there, I would imagine. But nonetheless, Embiid has just been spectacular on, off, but especially on the court. Every single night. I mean, you saw the All-Star game. He had, 36, 10, and 4, something like that. That's a regular night for Embiid throughout the season. So it just shows you what type of pace, what type of, level this guy is playing on. He looks the healthiest that he has ever looked in his career. The efficiency's getting back up there like it was last year. The numbers are better than last year. And then, of course, he's the anchor on the defensive end. I don't want that to go unnoticed. It doesn't get talked about enough. Rudy Gobert is this renowned defensive anchor. Joel Embiid is probably right behind Rudy Gobert in that aspect, up there with the Bam Adebayo's, Rudy Gobert's of the world. As far as a rim protector, as far as a defensive anchor, Joel Embiid covers all of that for the Sixers, so it needs to be notated. Number 2, I'm not no Nikola Jokic hater. This dude needs to be in the conversation. And to be clear about this list, the top 3 guys, in my opinion, have separated themselves from the other 2 or the rest of the entire rest of the MVP candidate list. Whoever the hell you have on it. I think Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo should be the universal top 3 MVP candidates. Put them in whatever order that you want. I just want to put that out there, and I will agree with you. But I think those need to be the consensus, the universal top 3. Giannis, Nikola Jokic, and Joel Embiid. But looking at Jokic, 26 points per game, 13.8 rebounds per game, 7.9 assists per game. Nuggets are 6th in the West at 33-25. I don't want this to go, unspoken. Nikola Jokic is doing spectacular stuff this year. And honestly, there's an argument that he deserves it over Embiid. And so, I'll talk about this a little bit later as when I talk about storylines I'm going to be paying attention to. But Nikola Jokic in this Denver Nuggets team is is something that I'm going to keep my eyes glued to the second half of this season. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm tired of speaking, from an unknown standpoint. Like, I can't sit here on my NBA broadcast, my NBA show, and say that Embiid is 100% better than Nikola Jokic when I don't watch Jokic play basketball. And I would advise everybody out there, if you're on the other side, do the same. Follow Embiid like a Sixers fan or a Sixers analyst would follow Embiid, and you're going to see the dominance that he has night in and night out. And I'm going to do the same thing for Jokic and the Nuggets this second half of the season because I want to see it. Jokic obviously isn't the box office guy. He's not the exciting dunker, crazy athletic ability, nonstop shooter like Steph Curry. He can shoot the ball. He can stroke it. Don't get me wrong. He's a great three-point shooter, but he doesn't shoot it at the clip that Steph does or any of the other elite three-point shooters like that. So the excitement just doesn't come with Jokic. But the skill, the talent, the statistics are there. I need to see what's going on there in Denver. I'm definitely keeping my eyes glued to Denver in that second half of the season. But something to be notated for Jokic. He's not quite the defender that Embiid is. That's why I have him a little bit lower than Embiid right now. We'll see as I watch. Is Jokic really not that good, not as good of a defender as Embiid? We're going to find out over the second half of the season. I'm going to definitely keep my eyes glued to that. But what needs to be notated regarding the Nuggets and Jokic's resume for this MVP candidacy is that the Nuggets are playing without Michael. Oh, my goodness. I'm forgetting. Michael Porter Jr. I was about to call him Michael Carter Williams. My God, that's a Philly in me. They're missing Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray. They're other two of the three top stars on that team. So for them to be in the 6th seed right now over a team like the Lakers that are struggling right now, right? It's pretty remarkable that Jokic is keeping basically a bench unit afloat over there in Denver. So that needs to be notated. Number 3, Giannis, 29.4 points per game, 11.2 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game. Bucks are 5th in the East, 36-24 right now, record-wise. Giannis, once again, is having an incredible season. He's going to run into voters fatigue. It's inevitable. It happens every single season to somebody. And Nikola Jokic may run into that voters fatigue as well, which it may play out in Joel Embiid's favor just because of voters fatigue. But Giannis obviously already has 2 MVP cases. These numbers are actually, if not the same on the same level as those MVP seasons, they're better in a sense. So Giannis definitely has a case to be in the top 3, not only the top 3, but the MVP, the number 1. He has a case to be made there. Just need to see the Bucks gather a little bit more success because their roster hasn't been as beaten up as some of these other rosters that are on this list. And I think that needs to be notated. But Giannis is playing out of his mind. He's a Defensive Player of the Year leading candidate right now. And it needs to be notated. But I think he is going to run into that voters fatigue just like he has the last 2 or 3 seasons because he could have been MVP last year, for being honest. Number 4, DeMar DeRozan is on an incredible tear. I'm sure everybody knows about it. He's one of my favorite players this year, as many that I've seen out there in the NBA community. But DeMar DeRozan is balling right now. He just broke Wilt Chamberlain's record. I can't even remember what it was for. Some type of scoring streak in the some type of 35-plus scoring streak in a row. I mean, he's just on a ridiculous tear. You see his numbers, 28.1 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, 5.1 assists per game. Bulls are the number 1 seed in the East. They're 38-21 on the season. So some may ask me, why isn't DeMar DeRozan number 1 on the list? Like, look at where his team's at. Look at how everything is played out. You know what it is for me? It's the fact of what Joel Embiid, what Nikola Jokic, what Giannis are doing each and every night. Their usage is ridiculous. Now, DeMar DeRozan, his usage is up there. Don't get me wrong. He's doing a lot for his team. You can see up over 5 rebounds, up over 5 assists, up over 28 points per game. But, keep up this tear, and maybe he does get into that top 3, right? Like, maybe he does break into that, and we start talking about him as one of the leading candidates. But right now, I just don't think he's been as dominant enough. With all due respect, because he's been dominant as hell. And I also think a little bit of that plays into the Bulls' success against winning teams this season as well. The other playoff teams in the East, the record doesn't fare out as well. And I know specifically going against the Sixers have dominated them and beat them all three of their matchups so far this season. And obviously Embiid has been the driving force behind that. So that's part of the reason I have DeMar DeRozan down there a little bit further. But keep playing like this, DeMar. You're going to be up at the top of the list here soon. And then number 5, I'm going with Ja Morant. There's a lot of different guys you could go here. Luka, Steph. There's so many different options. I'm going with Ja Morant. That team is so impressive in Memphis. They're so young. Ja Morant's their leader on and off the court. The guy's averaging 26.8 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, 6.9 assists per game. The Grizzlies are third in the Western Conference at 41-19. The Grizzlies already have 40-plus wins. And right now I'm just tooting the Grizzlies horn a little bit because the Grizzlies did play a little bit of the season without Ja Morant. He was out for a little while there. So it speaks to how good the roster is surrounding him. But nonetheless, that is a group of youthful, as far as experienced players. So Ja Morant leading this team to where they are at right now. Those numbers he's putting up, first-time All-Star. This guy's unbelievable. The sky's the limit. We're going to go back to that draft. What was it, 2019 or 2020? 2019 draft, I believe. No, it might have been the 2020 draft, him and Zion. We're going to have to revisit that very soon. I know I'm a Duke believer. I'm a Duke bias as far as analysts. But we're going to have to revisit that conversation here soon. It's getting to that point. Obviously, the news that broke from J.J. Redick today was incriminating, but that's something we'll talk about a little bit later on the show. But can't say enough about Ja Morant and that young group there in Memphis. He has been so impressive, and he's got to be one of the leading candidates for most improved player as well. I mean, that jump from what he did last year even to this season is just ridiculous. So we got to keep our eyes on that. But yes, that's my top 5 MVP candidates coming out of the All-Star break. There's arguments, there's resumes that could be mentioned on this list, but this is my top 5. And the top 3 you could even separate from the other 2 of the top 5 because I think those are the guys that are running away with the award right now. But yes, Joel Embiid number 1, Nikola Jokic at number 2, Giannis number 3, DeMar DeRozan number 4, and Ja Morant coming in at number 5. That rounds out my top 5 MVP candidates list. Next thing I wanted to get into, the top 10 power rankings. So obviously up on the screen here, you can see my top 10 teams in the NBA coming out of the All-Star break. So I'll just go in order here. Starting at the top, we got the number 1 seed, Phoenix Suns. So the Phoenix Suns right now, 48-10. They're the number 1 seed in the West. They're 9-1 in their last 10. They've won 7 in a row, and they're actually sitting at a plus 8.1 point differential on the season, which is actually number 1 in the NBA. But, the interesting thing about the Phoenix Suns as we leave the All-Star break is that they're not coming out of the All-Star break the same way that they came into it. And that's with a healthy CP3, who is another guy that's been mentioned as a possible MVP candidate. But he's going to be missing for 6 to 8 weeks. It's going to be interesting to see how that affects or impacts the Phoenix Suns throughout the rest of this season, see if they can stay afloat there. But Chris Paul, losing him never helps any roster that he's ever been on. And you just hope to see him get healthy. I'm tired of seeing him go through these injuries when he's on these squads that have more than a chance to win the NBA championship and add that to his resume. The point guard himself needs to get healthy there. But Phoenix Suns are my number 1 team in the NBA right now. The number 2 team in the NBA, as you can see right there, I have the Golden State Warriors. So Golden State Warriors are 42-17, excuse me. They're 6-4 in their last 10, and they've lost 2 in a row. They're sitting at plus 6.9 point differential in the season. Golden State Warriors are interesting. They just got Clay back probably like a month or so ago. They'll continue to get other guys back. Jonathan Kuminga has been impressive as far as a rookie on their squad there. And they may even see James Wiseman return to action here soon throughout the second half of the season. So they're just going to continue to add depth. Clay's going to get more into the routine of the team, start to get the chemistry built up there with the starting lineup. Draymond Green has been out for a little bit of time there, so they'll get him back. But this team is just floating on. They're headed right back to the perennial part of the playoffs, right? And they are legit contenders back with Clay healthy and a fully healthy roster there in Golden State. So Golden State Warriors is going to be my number 2 team, second seed in the West right now. Number 3, and this is where it starts to get interesting because I think we can all agree that Phoenix Suns and Golden State Warriors are probably the top 2 teams in the NBA right now. And that's just my opinion, but I think that should be the consensus. I think that should be a universal thing, similar to Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid, top 3 MVP candidates. Number 3, Miami Heat. They're sitting at 38-21, 6-4 in their last 10, one win streak, plus 4.5 point differential in the season, and they're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. The Heat have been playing so well early on this season and without so many of their pieces that I have to give a little bit of credit where it's due here. They're the number 1 seed in the East, rightfully so. Oh, wow. I'm sitting here. I got number 1 seed in the East for Chicago Bulls. I just confused myself. The Bulls are the number 2 seed currently, just to be transparent. Ignore my error there on the screen. But yes, Miami Heat are first in the East. I got confused there for a second, but they have been beyond impressive. The players that they've had to play with, a lot of guys that they're finding in their G League, their development programs, or their development affiliates. And they just got a well-oiled machine there. Eric Spoelstra is one of the best, if not the best coach in the NBA right now. And they're just playing lights out. Their culture, the Heat culture, right? It's something that I hate when it's referenced, but it's so true. They have built something so stable and so what would you call it? So sturdy there as far as culture and what that team can do. And every time they step on the floor, they got a chance against any team in the NBA. So Miami Heat at number 3 right there. Number 4, I mentioned them earlier, how impressed I've been. The Memphis Grizzlies, they're sitting at 41-19. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They actually are on a 1-game losing streak, and they're sitting at a plus 4.9 point differential in the season. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Ja Morant, how impressed I've been of the Memphis Grizzlies. As I mentioned, Ja Morant did miss a portion of the early part of the season. They were able to stay afloat. They're the 3rd seed in the Western Conference, which says a lot for such a young team. That's a team you do not want to run into in the playoffs. I know they're young. I know they lack experience, whatever. They got experience in the playoffs last year, for 1. And 2, they play physical. They play defense, and they got guys that can score. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jerry Jackson. They got guys all over the court that can make things happen, and they're a very physical and aggressive, young, energetic, fast team, and just a team you do not want to run into in the playoffs. I got them number 4 in my power rankings right now. Number 5, this one might catch people off guard. You might call me biased. Do what you got to do. I don't care. Philadelphia 76ers are the number 5 team in the NBA right now. They're coming off a huge win against the Bucks going into the All-Star break. That speaks for itself. Obviously, they had the huge loss to the Celtics. I threw that game out the window. And I feel that is justified after a win on the road against Milwaukee right before the All-Star break when James Harden was not playing in that game. We were down quite a few guys. So able to win that game on the road against Milwaukee, that said a lot to me. It allowed me to throw out that massacre that Boston did to Philly last Tuesday. And I'm moving with the Philadelphia 76ers, the addition of Harden to that roster. They are the number 5 team in the NBA, and I think they're the number 2 team in the Eastern Conference right now, just in my opinion, once again. But we'll get into the other teams in the Eastern Conference throughout this list. Philadelphia 76ers currently the 5 seed, I believe. 3rd seed, excuse me. Wow, I'm all over the place with these seeds. It's because there's so much parity. There's so much parity in between, each team in the Eastern Conference. You lose one game and you might drop 3 or 4, spots in the seeding. So Philadelphia 76ers, 5th in my top 10 power rankings, 3rd seed in the East currently at 35-23. And they're sitting at a plus 1.5 point differential in the season, 6-4 in their last 10, and they're on a 1-game winning streak, as I mentioned, against the Milwaukee Bucks there. Coming in at number 6, I have the number 2 seed in the East. I know that says number 1 up there. That's obviously an error. I have the Chicago Bulls sitting at 38-21. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 5 in a row, and they're sitting at a plus 2.2 point differential in the season. As I mentioned earlier in my DeMar DeRozan piece or segment during the top 5 MVP candidates, the only thing that is detracting me from the Chicago Bulls is their resume against winning teams. And specifically just watching them in their matchups with the Philadelphia 76ers, they were just brutally dominated inside. And I think that's something that's going to, come back to haunt them down the stretch is when they run into teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, even the Miami Heat with a guy like Bam Adebayo. But obviously the Philadelphia 76ers with that force of Embiid in the middle. Any type of big man presence, I think, is going to cripple that Chicago Bulls team, despite them having guys like Levine, DeMar DeRozan. Now, we'll see how it plays out. Their backcourt has been banged up with Caruso out. Lonzo Ball's been out, and that's a great defensive backcourt, great facilitating backcourt as well. But they're definitely a force to be reckoned with in the East. They've maintained their great winning percentage throughout the first half of the season. They're still sitting at the second seed. I know I have first up there, but you may see them back in first by the end of the week for all we know. But the Chicago Bulls coming in at number 6 for me. Number 7, the Milwaukee Bucks. Some people might have them a little bit higher. I've seen a lot of people with the Bucks and the Heat higher than the Sixers and the Nets. I get it. Fair enough. But when I'm looking at the Bucks right now in comparison to teams like the Nets, and I know you don't see the Nets on here, which we'll talk about that a little bit. But looking at them compared to like the Nets, the Miami Heat, the Sixers of the world in the Eastern Conference, even the Bulls, the Bucks haven't been that beat up. Like, yes, at the beginning of the season, they dealt with some COVID issues, but those kind of cleared up. They got Chris Middleton. They got Drew Holiday back. And they've had those 3 guys for most of this season. And they're still sitting at the 5th seed in the East. And, Giannis is having this ultimate MVP candidate. I just think they should be up in at least the top 3 seeds of the Eastern Conference right now. So their inconsistency has penalized them in these top 10 power rankings. But nonetheless, 36-24 in the season, 6-4 in the last 10. They're on a 1-game losing streak and sitting at plus 3.4 point differential currently. Coming in at number 8, I have the Utah Jazz. They're currently sitting at the 4th seed in the West. They are 36-22, 6-4 in their last 10. They're on a 1-game losing streak and a plus 6.8 point differential. Excuse me. So, looking at the Jazz, the reason I have them at number 8, despite being the 4th seed in the West, it's really just the fact that they're coming back with a similar squad. There hasn't been many additions to their team. They didn't show any incredible improvements over the first half of this. In reality, they've kind of regressed from last season where they were the number 1 seed in the West. Maybe the number 2 seed. I can't remember how they and Phoenix finished out the season. But nonetheless, they were in the top 3 seeds in the West last season. And this year, they've kind of came back down to earth. People are wondering about Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert fit, if they're going to be split up in the future. So still some work to do for the Utah Jazz, in my opinion. Coming in at number 9, I got the Boston Celtics. This one's interesting because they've just been hot as hell over the last, 2 months, I guess you could say, January and February. Since the new year, they've just been on fire. They're sitting at 34-26. Currently the 6th seed in the East. They're 9-1 in their last 10. They're on a 1-game losing streak. They dropped that 1 to the Pistons right after they just dogged out the Philadelphia 76ers, which if they don't lose to the Pistons, maybe they get up higher on this list, honestly. They're sitting at a plus 5.4 point differential currently on the season. The Celtics are looking awesome. Their defense, they've kind of figured something out there. They're the number 2 defense in the NBA. And they're doing that with, just this Robert Williams, Al Horford combination at the center position that is really, really giving them a lot of switchable leeway with the other 4 players in those said lineups with those 2 centers. So the flexibility, the versatility of Robert Williams and Al Horford is doing a lot for the Boston Celtics, but also Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown just starting to figure out how to move the ball around with their teammates and get them involved. The acquisition of Derek White is going to prove very beneficial to them. He fits exactly what they needed. But the Boston Celtics team, we definitely need to keep our eyes on in the second half of the season because, as they get closer to the playoffs, as they move farther up the Eastern Conference rankings, they're going to be a very deadly opponent come playoff time. You do not want to play Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the playoffs, period. I don't care who your team is. You don't want to play them. That's not a desirable opponent. Coming in at number 10, this is where it got really, really interesting as far as the 10th spot. But I do need to throw a little bit of respect on the Cleveland Cavaliers name. And, I really messed up doing that because I have them highlighted in green. Obviously, none of their team colors are green. I tried to go keep team color coordinated, but I was getting rushed around earlier. Forgot to change their highlighted color. But nonetheless, the Cavs are currently sitting at the 4th seed in the East right now at 35-23. They are 6-4 in their last 10. They've actually lost 2 in a row, but they are sitting at a plus 4.2 point differential. They had a great showing in the All-Star weekend. Obviously, the All-Star events were held in Cleveland, Ohio. And you got to see, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, a few of their guys throughout the weekend. And it was nice to see that for Cleveland. Honestly, it sucks that LeBron was taking all the credit for Cleveland. Like, dude, you played for the Lakers for one. That's a whole different conversation. But I just wanted to, shed some light on the Cleveland Cavaliers. I want to see if they can keep afloat in the second half of the season. But they have looked really good to start the season. So they round out my top 10 there. Honorable mention would go to the Dallas Mavericks. I believe they're the 5 seed in the West right now. They're sitting at 35-24, 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row, plus 3.3 point differential. Luka Doncic has been playing out of his fucking mind lately, and I think they continue that if we're being quite completely honest here. But honorable mention goes to the Mavs. I couldn't put them over the Cavs quite yet. I actually trust the Cavs a little bit more despite their youth and lack of experience. And then I have a starred team here, which is the Brooklyn Nets, because they're an interesting case. Obviously, they're a top 10 team when healthy. Probably a top 5, top 3 team when healthy, if we're being completely honest. Even Austin told you he would pick a fully healthy Nets roster against a Philadelphia 76ers roster in the playoffs if it came down to it. But nonetheless, the Nets are 31-28, 2-8 in their last 10. They lost 1 in a row. And yeah, so they've had a terrible stretch recently leading up to that trade of James Harden. We got to see how Ben Simmons fits back in with everything. We got to see when KD comes back healthy, vaccination status for Kyrie Irving, how that plays out in New York. But nonetheless, the Nets are going to be in this conversation if they can get healthy and get back into that playoff race. But the current state of the Nets, I could not put them in my top 10 power rankings. I'm sorry. But as you can see, round out the list, 10 Cleveland Cavaliers, 9 Boston Celtics, 8 Utah Jazz, 7 Milwaukee Bucks, 6 Chicago Bulls, number 5 Philadelphia 76ers, number 4 Memphis Grizzlies, number 3 Miami Heat, number 2 Golden State Warriors, and number 1 the Phoenix Suns. We'll see how long these stay in place. My guess is that they will be moved around by the end of the week once action picks up again. But we will see for sure. So as we look at the top storylines to watch in the second half of the NBA season after the All-Star break here, I wanted to pinpoint quite a few top storylines across the NBA and what to keep our eyes on, what I'll be keeping my eyes on personally, and what you can expect content on throughout the rest of this NBA season. But the first one is obviously, and I know some people will look to Harden and Philly, which they're probably on the same level, I would imagine. But Ben Simmons in Brooklyn, what is this going to look like? What is this going to look like, guys? I can't wait to see him hit the court. They said today, I think he's going to ramp it up over the next few weeks, not months. So we may see Ben Simmons in a Brooklyn uniform on the court by the end of March, hopefully. I doubt he's back by that March 10th showing against Philly. I just don't see why they would do that. It's just going to be a volatile situation. There's no way that that's good for Ben Simmons' mental health, right? So I just doubt I see them holding him out at least until March 10th. But hopefully we see him on the court for the Brooklyn Nets by the end of March. I want to see what that team looks like going into the playoffs. The other part of Brooklyn to keep an eye on is obviously just the vaccination situation that's taking place in New York. Right now, Kyrie Irving is playing half of the Nets games, only away games currently, outside of New York, obviously. No, he can play it. If I'm not wrong, he can play, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments there. he can play at the New York Knicks. You can only play as an opposing unvaccinated player. So if you're on the Nets or on the Knicks in a Knicks home game or in a Nets home game, you have to be vaccinated to play. But if the opposing team comes with an unvaccinated player, they can play in the game. Weird as hell. But I do see, New York, they're going to have to change that rule. That makes zero sense. And I do see Kyrie being able to fully play by the time playoffs arrive. So we'll see how that plays out. Going to keep my eyes glued to that. And then obviously Kevin Durant's health. That's going to be a big storyline in Brooklyn as well. Need him healthy to have a shot in hell, right? So we'll keep an eye on that. And then also they did come to agreement. I believe they are signing Goran Dragic. So he's being bought out by the Spurs, I believe, and he's headed to Brooklyn. I'm not sure that fit. I mean, I guess why not add depth, but I guess we'll see, right? No, that's why we're keeping our eyes on it in the second half of the season. Number 2 I got lined up is James Harden. Obviously, he's in Philly. The reason I have a picture of Embiid and his son Arthur there is just because it's ridiculously wholesome and I love it. But aside from that, along with the Harden conversation and what he brings to Philly, as far as what I'm keeping my eyes glued to in the second half of the season, I'm also keeping my eyes glued to the effect Harden has on Embiid's MVP campaign. Does Embiid's statistical totals go up, down, stay the same? What does his MVP campaign looks like? Does he fall down the list because he has help now? We're going to see how that all plays out, but that's something I'm keeping my eye on, obviously, throughout the rest of the season. Something we talked about just a little bit ago, Boston Celtics and how hot they've been recently. They're probably the hottest team in the NBA since the new year, and definitely the best defensive team since the new year. They're creeping their way up to the number 1 defensive rated team in the NBA. But can they stay hot? Is this the real Boston team that we're seeing right now? Have they figured it out? Is Udoka finally getting things in place there? Brad Stevens as a GM in the front office, are they finally getting things going there in Boston? Something I'm keeping my eyes on throughout the rest of this season. As I mentioned earlier, Jaylen Brown, a duo of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum is not a duo that you want to see in the playoffs. So just something to keep in mind there. The other thing that I wanted to pay attention to throughout the rest of the season, obviously the Lakers. Now they have struggled, obviously. I don't even think they're in the playoff picture right now unless they're a play-in team, but nonetheless, they have struggled. They have fell below expectations and they are getting ridiculed across the league right now. The reason I'm paying attention to the Lakers is for obvious reasons. They've been a disappointment. AD's injury, but mostly because I want to see the composure, the mindset of LeBron James. I want to see what's going to happen after this season concludes. I don't think the Lakers have a chance in hell at winning the championship, to be transparent as possible. But just the comments over the weekend, regarding LeBron returning to Cleveland, regarding LeBron eventually playing with his son, Bronny. This guy's out of LA very soon. I don't know if it's this off season, but at the very least, the following one, he will be out of LA and on to a new team. We can talk about suitors at a later time once that is confirmed, but I do see LeBron out of there within the next 2 seasons. And it's just an interesting concept because you look at their fall from grace and it was so quick, and it was really, if we're being transparent, it was to LeBron's doing. I mean, the roster that he wanted to build here with Russell Westbrook. And obviously the fit that just does not, it doesn't work here. It does not work in LA. So I'm keeping my eyes on that. And then finally, I have some guys notated here. Obviously the Cleveland trio there, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Jared Allen. They looked great in the All-Star weekend. They looked like they had a ton of fun. Cleveland got well represented. But can they stay afloat throughout the second half of this season? Can they, get into the playoffs and make some noise? That's what I'm really looking at this season. I have Desmond Bane pictured there on the right. Memphis Grizzlies is another team. Can they hold their place as a top 5, top 4 seed in the Western Conference? I mean, that's a huge feat in a regular season. I know regular season doesn't mean the world to everybody, but for a young team like that to hold a top 4 seed in the Western Conference would mean the world as far as confidence going forward for that team. So I'm interested to see if teams like Memphis, like Cleveland, even the Minnesota Timberwolves, Charlotte Hornets have been on a downward spiral lately. Toronto Raptors have actually have upticked. They've brought themselves into the playoff picture. Who stays afloat out of these teams? The Cleveland, the Memphis, the Minnesota, the Charlotte, the Torontos of the world. These young teams, inexperienced teams. I want to see who stays afloat there. So those are some of the storylines that I'm keeping my eyes on. And then the last one that I'm keeping my eyes on, and I don't have any pictures for it there because it was kind of a last minute thing that I thought of, but CP3, 6 to 8 weeks out with I believe it's like a broken thumb or something like that. Where does that place the Suns throughout all of this? Where do they drop to? Because I know they have a talented roster. They're the number one team in the NBA. I know. They have depth. I know. Losing Chris Paul means a lot. More than statistics can show, more than I can describe. Leadership, running the offense, it's so much that he feeds into, just confidence in general for this team. So Devin Booker's going to have to man the ship for a little bit of time there, a little over 2 months. And I just am curious to see how that's going to play out for Phoenix. But nonetheless, there are some major storylines to follow over the next, 2 months, 3 months, over the next 30, 40 games of NBA action for each of these teams. So much to pay attention to. You have what I'm looking at. Ben Simmons in Brooklyn, Kyrie in Brooklyn, Harden in Philly, Embiid in Philly. Does Boston stay hot? CP3 out 6 to 8 weeks. Do the Suns drop? Lakers turn it around? Are they going to make the playoffs? Where's LeBron at the end of this season, in the offseason? Where's he headed? Cleveland, Memphis, Minnesota, Charlotte, Toronto. Teams like that, can they stay afloat? Can they make themselves heard in the playoffs? All stuff that I am focusing on throughout the rest of the season. And then, as I mentioned earlier on in the show, I am keeping my eyes glued to the Denver Nuggets because I need to be informed when I'm talking about these MVP candidates. I see a ton of Steph Curry. I see a ton of DeMar DeRozan, even Giannis. I don't see a lot of Jokic. So my eyes are going to be glued to, Nikola Jokic and that Denver Nuggets team. I'm actually going to the Philadelphia 76ers matchup against the Denver Nuggets on March 14th at the Wells Fargo Center. So if you want to, meet up in person, definitely head to that game. Let's link up at the Wells Fargo Center and enjoy some big man greatness. But I'm keeping my eyes glued to Nikola Jokic. I need to be informed. I need to be educated on this man's game. And I just want to see how dominant he is. The numbers show it. I just want to see it for myself, see it from my own eyes, and really get a good scope of him versus Embiid and how great they are compared to one another. So I'll keep my eyes glued to that. Before we get out of here tonight, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, obviously. Thank you to Austin Krell for joining the show. Awesome guest. I can't wait to have him again. But make sure, if you're not already, subscribe to DSM Media here on YouTube. If you're not already, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Put your comments there in the comments section. Make sure we're getting as much engagement on this channel as possible. We want to we want to engage with the listeners and the viewers. We want to talk with you. We want to get you involved in our show. We want to bring you on as guests. So follow along, subscribe, follow DSM Media at DSM_media on Twitter. You can follow DSM Media on TikTok at DSM Media, and then on Instagram at DSM.DoSomethingMajor. For myself, you can find me at Scotty Drown across all social media platforms. I keep it the same across all of them, make it easy on you. And before we get out of here, I do want to shout out my sponsors over at manscaped.com. Make sure, head over to manscaped.com, use code DSM to receive 20% off and free shipping. Get all of your manly genital utensils. Get yourself straightened up, men. It's a new year. We got, warm weather coming. You don't want, a bunch of pubic hairs down there getting sweaty. Make sure you head over to manscaped.com. Use code DSM for 20% off and free shipping. That is going to be it for this episode of Scotty Talks NBA. I hope you guys enjoyed the All-Star Weekend. I hope you guys enjoyed the first half of the NBA season. Hope you enjoyed the first half of Scotty Talks NBA season. Cheers to continuing it on strong in the second half of the NBA season. Cheers to the Sixers going after this ring. Let's go Sixers. Let's go NBA. Let's go DSM Media. Do something major. Love you all out there. That's going to be it